Good morning. Oh, sorry. That's a bad lighting today. Oh, well. How are you doing, Lisa? You did? You good? Are you good? Okay, good. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes and I'll get my stuff together well. Oops. Where is... I had it here. Dang it. This works. Oops. We have two of you on here. Should we just get started? I think we should just get started. I think you guys get me all to yourself today. So it's going to be short, or if you've got a lot of questions, then it'll be good because there's not a lot of mamas on here. So let's just start with, we're going to talk about middle school as kind of our focus today. It's an area that can feel scary at first because the amount of information is so vast. And so I want you to feel free to ask questions. It's definitely what this is for. And to tell me sort of where you're at with your planning, because I want you to feel comfortable in asking me for help. So I know that my competitors do some of them do a full laid out guide, but there's a lot of reasons that I don't. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because I didn't want to write one, because there's a lot of information. No, so much of the information becomes very centered on where you live in middle school and high school, depending on like where your focus is. So, there are things that we focus on in North America and the United States that would be different for the focus for other places. So that's one reason. The other reason is that they just change during this portion. There's so much to them that they've made this transition through between 6th and 7th grade, and their capacities are bigger. They don't need nearly as much direction usually. I mean, they still need some. But you're going through this space of it's great transformation. And by the time actually that they are in 8th grade, I thought it was interesting. I thought I would read this to you. I even though this isn't my favorite, I still pull it out sometimes. And I was reading it for some of the notes that that teachers wrote. And so one of the things that I was thinking about was what it says about grade 8. And it says, class 8, during which the pupils pass their 14th birthday, signals the end of the class teacher period. Historically, this used to be the school leaving age for many pupils, and the entry point for apprenticeship in a trade or craft. As such, grade 8 is seen as a rounding off of the child's schooling, with an established upper school and raising of the school leaving age children through Europe. Over the last 50 years, this is no longer the case that children leave the school at 14. So I think and I remember years and years ago, Barbara Dewey had said to me, she said, well, if you do what you're supposed to do, by the time they get to 8th grade, then really the bulk of your work is done. That after that, you're refining, you're adding to your, and you know, in the time that we live now, it seems that the way that our schooling is after 8th grade is when it starts, like when the bulk starts. And so I think that we have to sort of switch how we're looking at things, because from here on in, it's very much, the relationship is very different. They definitely, especially starting at about 14, they need mentors, they need good mentors. And so our job becomes like finding those good mentors, finding those people that we can insert in their life. That doesn't mean we're not doing any of the teaching, but it does mean that we start to outsource enough stuff that they have experiences with other adults that are worthy of those, of being with our children. And so as homeschoolers, we tend to spend a lot more time vetting than other people do. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And sometimes we think we have it and it still blows up in our face. Either that person ends up being a jerk, or they die, or, stuff happens. And so it all like sort of pulls into this like transformative place that they're in. And so I'm hoping that just that piece of knowledge helps you with regards to what you have going forward. I think that there's so much information in these 2 years, and then I don't cover it all, and usually, and so I end up pulling a lot of it, some of it into ninth. So I want you to feel like this middle time is an okay time. It's an okay time to sort of accomplish all that. I think for the most part, you can get 7th done in a year, for the most part. And I think that it's when you get to the content of 8th and 9th that it's like incredibly, almost overwhelming. You have to step back and take a deep breath and take each piece, because there's so much dark history that goes through there. It feels like it takes longer, I think, because it's not sunshine and daisies. It's a lot of like the darkness of human history. And so and I think, like myself, and I think probably most of you, when it's the dark, icky stuff, it's not stuff we look forward to. It's not stuff that we're really excited to teach. And so it feels like it drags on. And if we have sensitive kids, then we're also taking care to explain some of these concepts and some of these periods in history in a way that they're going to connect with and not want to run away from. Because I do think it's really important that we get we get the history into them. And it's it is not necessarily just because I'm a history buff. It's because I do believe that if we don't understand the past, we can't understand the future. And so much of what's going on right now is stuff that is like understanding the past. And the people that don't understand the past are really frustrated about politics right now. I'm frustrated about it, but I go, well, looks like stuff that's happened before. So anyways, I want to make sure that I get all of your questions though. So we have 6 of you on here. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
So I'm at my weekly plans,
Mm-hmm.
and again, I'm feeling overwhelmed because so I have a 3-day schedule,
Mm-hmm.
and I just feel like the topics are so big. Like each day is a huge, huge topic, and I don't know how.
Which grade are we talking about? 7th or 8th?
8.
Okay.
Yeah, so so for one instance, like for week 3 in September, I have the fur trade of Canada, the War of 1812 of Canada, and then Laura Secord on our 3rd day. So how do I bring those 3 big topics, but how when we do the younger grades, like grade 5, we read a story, we let it sit, we draw, and then the next day we write.
Right.
How do I bring those 3 together so it's not so much.
Well, and I think what's important to remember too is even though there's an insane amount of information during this time, you are going to touch on things again in 10th, 11th, 12th,
Okay.
but in a different way. So I was just looking at the excuse me, at the chart here. So you look again in 10th grade, you're looking again at North American history or Native American history. You're looking more at ancient history, more at Greeks and Civil War in the 19th century. So that's a lot of stuff right there. And then you're looking at Rome and medieval history again in 11th grade. So you're sort of, and then in 12th grade, you're bringing like all of this together. And it's definitely has a different spin then. You're looking at sort of the impulse of human beings rather than like the deeds of human beings at that point. And so allow yourself to remember that it's a layering process. I would make sure that when you've got these longer days, those days when you've got these older kids, they are going to take longer. So I know you've got your younger kids too. I like to make sure that the younger kids are done so that I have a good 2-hour chunk if I need to, or more with my middle schooler. And that's about when we ended up like not finishing until about 2. And just because there's so much information. So lay it out really well. Decide, really make sure that you know the information backwards and forwards. I think that's super important. And for that, I have to tell you, all those dates and everything, I am always keeping my own timeline or keeping my own notes. I love 3x5 cards. They really help me when it comes to lesson planning. So even though I definitely use this is just the roadmap. It's just a roadmap. It doesn't tell me. So if you can think about this as the roadmap and of your notes or your 3x5 cards as like the restaurant menu that you went to from this roadmap, then you might be able to like really picture what it is you need. And I know Anna Catherine, you and I have talked about this before, like the amount of notes that you feel like you're taking and the prep. I like to go through content first. The first time I study, I go through it for content. Whether it be a movie, reading an article, whatever it is about the topic. So I go through and just for content, I don't take any notes. The second time through, I take notes. I think about what my teaching points might be, and what it is that I want them to get out of, whether it be like a resource like a documentary or get out of our main lesson. And so that's where then you're taking that roadmap and expanding it into the menu, and that from that menu then comes the lesson that you're handing out to them. So what I would say is as they got older, I required less art about main lesson. And that means I wasn't requiring 2 per week. Like for instance, with Eleanor, I started requiring 1 good piece per week, and I let her pick the topic because she had already, like all of my kids by the time they got there were doing art. Like maybe if I just did that, then maybe I could be there, but y'all know I don't just do that. So that's not my superpower. And so all of them were able to come up with pieces on their own. And I don't have any middle school ones here, but I'll show you the reasons why. Like, so like this is just, this was in 10th grade, but this is what we were doing, like combustion, and she had to design her own car. And so she like designed the whole thing and designed the engine. And so I know what I want from their drawings, and that is like them to spend their time on it and them to really think about the topic. And so when I assign that, so you might in this case assign 1 out of those 3 days. So there is definitely going to be writing, but I do that the next day. So you give the information first thing. Okay, I want you to write about what we did yesterday, what we talked about yesterday. And I definitely correct it because we go through it for grammar and all of that. I don't generally make them do a second draft of everything because we would be correcting drafts all the time. So unless it's a child that hands me something that is incredibly sloppy and messy and I know they can do better, or I look at it and I go, what the heck? Why are there no capitals and no periods? No, like, you know, and we have to go through things. Then I have to sort out whether or not it's a laziness issue or an issue of they don't know. And so it gives you that writing period gives you a good amount of information about your children. And so we would definitely do a writing piece like every day, just about. So you've got, you're recapping, except for that first day. So you're recapping on the second day. Well, I guess you would be doing the writing piece from the week before. Sorry. So you are every day you're doing some writing. You're recapping what you did the day before, and you're moving on to the next amount of material. And I try to give their space in there that by the end of the week, I go, okay, you know, we've schooled for 3 days. I'd like to see an art piece on this by Sunday or whatever. Does that make sense? Where did Lisa go?
I'm here. Yes, that makes sense.
Oh, she disappeared.
I'm here.
Does that make sense? Does that help at all?
Yeah. And do you like have, so you kind of mentioned it already, but I wanted you to talk through what your day would be like with them. So what you kind of talked about that.
Yeah, no,
right?
I'm happy to talk about it. So that, like I said, that's about the time that we went to about 2. And so we either have to have a really good snack tray, or I've got to pause somewhere in there and make something more substantial. And I really prefer to just have a really good snack tray, and then we have a big lunch around 2. And then that allows us to have a bigger lunch and then not such a big dinner, because we're all here together. So obviously that's different because Dad's here with us. But so I would fiddle around with that and see if you can either that or make lunch very simple. So it's something that you can hop up and make while they're still doing schoolwork, and or if you've got a younger one that can help make lunch, do that. So we still get up, and you know, middle schoolers start to get harder to get up. So I'm pretty tough though, because the way I feel about it is if you want to stay up till 10 o'clock at night, as long as you can get up by 7, then that's fine. If you can't get your fanny out of bed at 7, then guess what? You're going to bed when your siblings go to bed. And so, and I know that's a hard and frustrating thing, because I know they want to stay up later, and there's all this stuff about sleep rhythms, but you really need them to be able to get up. And if they're getting up by 7, that's always been my rule, 7 o'clock. And in our house, because our kids end up going to seminary in 9th grade, it's good that because you know, they've been getting up at 8 when they were younger, and then 7:30, and now it's like, I need you up at 7. So in 6th grade or so, start having them set an alarm. So by 7th grade, it's not a big deal. And so they're getting up. We're meeting, still doing our gathering around 9, and eating breakfast, and then we're off on a walk. Everybody goes on a walk, even the bigger kid. And I utilize that walk for a lot of things. I might utilize that to review the day's assignments, because the littler ones usually are just running ahead of us. Even Sam. When I was doing Ellie and we were all walking, I could talk to her about her lessons from the day before and ask her, you know, how are you doing? How are you feeling about your art piece for this week, or whatever it is? And then we come back, and the teenagers got reading to do from that hopefully can, if you can, make it go along with the main lessons. I like, but it's easy to get through it really fast. I like the story of Mankind by Van Loon. And it's thick, and it tells the story of mankind in kind of a story form, and so it's not super boring. And I pull that out whenever I don't have something else substantial about the time period for them to read, and just because it kind of goes through history, and it gives them, I want them to hear history from as many viewpoints and as many voices as possible, so that they can start to form their own thoughts. So we might go on that walk, come back. We're all usually back by 10, 9:30, 10. And then they're reading, and I do the younger ones. And the younger ones, even if we were still doing, like, because Ellie's going to take her GED, but even if we were still doing lessons this year, I would have Sam done as a 6th grader, I would have him done by 11 and 11:30. And then, just because I rotate really well. And I'd rather leave earlier for our walk and come home and be able to get started at a good time than have school go longer. So then Ellie is usually coming to me, and we're doing her main lesson, and spending some horrible time in math land with her. But in general, that's how it goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
So I would just sort of like feel it out, feel out how in your rhythm is going to change as they're changing, and our job is to change with it, but don't let it slide, because I think those teenagers need the rhythm as much as the little ones do, and as much as we do. And so keeping them going keeps their habits in a good place, keeps them from going off the rails, keeps them from thinking too much, like all of those things that we want to be careful about.
Yeah, I agree.
So, okay, anybody else? Anna Catherine?
Yeah, so with the Story of Mankind, because actually I just ordered that. So I was thinking that was a book that I was going to use as a resource, but that's one I could actually give them to read.
You can use it as a resource. It's just one of those, there's some books that have such great storytellers that I try to just let the kids read it. And Kovacs is one. We pull from Kovacs's books generally for content, but then the pieces that I know we don't get to, I let them read. Jacob Strait's the same way for me. And I think Van Loon has a unique storytelling sense too. And there's a lot of resources on mainlesson.com that are older. I just am trying to be more careful because some of them are so Eurocentric, and we want to, of course, have that for what we're, for some of what we're doing, but we also want to make sure that they're not racist.
Yeah. Yep.
And I know that so often, as long as I've read it first, then I can say, okay, so when you get to chapter blah, then we need to make sure that we understand that this person's perspective, well, this person is an amazing storyteller, their perspective is not necessarily what the world perspective is. And then we will talk about it. We'll talk about like what's the more correct term, or what's the more correct view.
Okay.
It's a hard one because of course history is generally written by the victors, but it's also written by the people that had access to the printing press. And so yeah, so we just have to sometimes.
So listening to you talk about schedule, I never thought about on our walk reviewing the lessons. So when you were coming back with Ellie, you weren't sitting there and reviewing the previous day's lesson before you go into your new main lesson.
If for some reason I couldn't get her butt out of bed and I went on a walk without her, because that's my other rules, I don't wait around. Like we're going. So if you want some physical activity this morning and you want to be able to get your lesson started with me, then this is your time. This is your time because you've got my ear, and let's go. But yeah, I mean, generally we would recap, and I don't just use the lessons for recapping. If I've got her alone in the car and I go, hey, what are you thinking about? I mean, I know it sounds silly to go, what do you think about the War of 1812? but still, it's an opportunity to really talk about it. And I noticed that sort of this last year, she went to a Constitution class, and it really lit her up on things, on like helping her understand politics more, and so then she was wanting to talk about things more and things like that. So I think that we want to keep that dialogue part open, and also encourage other adults in their life to talk to them about this stuff too, especially if you know somebody who's a history teacher or a history buff and loves that kind of stuff. And I think or not just history, but chemistry and everything else.
Right. And then with Sam, are you coming back and still doing math with him later?
So with Sam, it's going to be an experiment.
Because you said, like, I'm done with Sam at 11:30. But
yes, because he was in 5th grade. So this year he's in 5th grade. And so we'll be starting on the 1 hour a day math. And and he does okay in math. It's not his favorite, but he does okay. So I think we'll see. I think that we'll probably ease into it and start with 30 minutes and then work our way up to an hour within the month, just because I want it to feel good for him.
Right. Okay.
So, I just have the two of them this year, which feels really weird. And so Soraya will be easy. She's in 1st grade. And then Sam will probably be done by lunch, 1:30, 1 at the latest. Okay.
Because I had been with McCrae coming back and doing, if we were going to do some math review, doing it later. And I feel like we didn't do quite enough math in 4th grade. We did, but I just
I'm
want to
feeling the
get.
same way about 5th grade with Sam. For sure.
Yeah, and so for 5th grade, I'm thinking of coming back to him to do math. He likes to have
A
a
break.
break, or go cross stitch, or go
I think that's
go
fine.
go sit on the couch and do some handwork,
If
and
that
then
works for him to sort of settle things down, sure.
yeah, he has a hard time just one to the next. He'll sit there and we'll do main lesson, and then he'll work on his drawing or something while I've moved on to the next
The other
kids.
ones. Does I know a lot of times kids that have dyslexia going on, their math comprehension stuff is way better. Like, is that true?
His is in some math, yes, and in some math processes, yes, and in other math processes, he gets disoriented knowing where he's at, and that's where I want to come back and work on where you are in the problem. Because if I walk him through the problem,
I had the one from Sam.
if I walk him through the problem,
right, then it's okay.
He's perfect. And he's like, oh, this is no problem. But if he's doing the problem himself, he gets disoriented.
I'm looking for Sam's main lesson book because I want to show you what we did if I can find it. It's all messy over here. I have not purged to get ready for the new school year. I still have this. We went through. I don't know where it is. Anyway, so I'll tell you what we did. So I went through and like with the long multiplication problem, I went through each step in a different color, and then I put a number next to it with a circle around it. So this is step 1. And then and that was like a template that whenever, so I had all the long multiplication problem, like a long multiplication problem, and on the other side a long division problem, so that he could just, I'd say, okay, I'm going to set you down with these problems. And that was after we had done a few together, of course.
Okay.
But because process is so important, I would say, okay, we've done some together. I want you to pull out your piece of paper and see if you can remember, and I would write next to them, step 1, multiply, step 2, so that then he could take it and have it for the next problem.
Okay.
And one thing that I have done with probably with all of them is I will take, I make them check their own work. So
I do too.
A long multiplication problem, it's got to become a long division problem. So I might only give them 2 problems, but it's really 4.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I have done that as well. I've made him check everything.
That's where I found out that we have he has the biggest struggles is with that process part. So drawing it all out and making a template was really helpful because he could do all of the other parts of math with no problem. But when there's like multiple steps, and I have to say, I remember having struggles with both long division and long multiplication as a child. And I wasn't having trouble with the times tables. It was just the process, the order that all
the order. No, it's the order, and I've slowed it down, and we've been doing some of his Davis method about it. And I kind of curious to see if leaving the summer to rest, if that's helped.
It helps.
So Locke is redoing 8th grade.
Okay.
Because we did all the audio processing disorder training.
Right.
He's going to redo 8th with Brearley. And so that is our plan, although he's taking algebra at the high school.
Okay.
And so, but I've noticed just in stories he's been picking from the library to listen to, like he listened to another World War II story. So, and I'm not going to get to that in our American history this year, but I thought listening to you talk, it would make sense to go ahead and start giving him some of those history books and reading that on his own so that it's meeting where he might be.
Right. No, I mean, I think so. And then you're going to go more in depth when you do main lessons with him on it. There's just so much information, and it's all important information. Like, I can't look at it and go, oh, well, I think I'm just going to not talk about Irish famine because it informed some other stuff that happened. So it's not like you can just skip it. And so, but there is so much information. So no, I would in fact, I would then think about getting him some movies or documentaries that sort of help feed that. What is it? That movie War Horse, I want to say, was World War I.
Okay.
And it's it's a feel-good movie. It's about this horse that goes through the war, and that guy like loses him, and then he finds him again, and it's like the horse's journey.
Okay. I mean, and other than that, it's just my trying to consume all of this history and knowledge and not feel overwhelmed on a regular
I know,
basis.
and I think that it's good that you're doing them together in this way. I mean, I normally am not about combining, especially in the lower grades, but in the upper grades, there's history that he has to have before he can go on to the next phase. So it's okay.
Yeah. Well, and I just feel like it gives him a chance to catch up on his writing skills now that he has this filter and he's able to hear a little better. So I feel like it's what he needs, and he actually is very happy about it. I wouldn't be doing it if he wasn't happy about it, but he's very happy about it. But it's trying to find a little bit of extras to give him to where his brain is that Burley is not quite there, and finding how to bring that. And
When
then
is she
it's
14?
Oh, so she's my very young. She was 13 in May,
Okay.
and so
So
and
yeah,
you,
she's not ready for some of it, but yeah,
except she's already going into it. I mean, she overheard a lot of what because the main block we did last year for him was American history, so she heard a lot of it.
Right.
And then she's interested in it anyway. And so
I think it will, what you'll find is, even though she's really interested in it, is that the way it hits her will be different than it would have if you had done it before. That's one thing that Waldorf takes a lot of heat about, hey, you don't get into the depths of American history till they're older. And I go, well, I like them to understand it. So let's have them really be able to understand it, like from their heart than just in their head.
And we're not doing American history till January,
That's probably a good idea.
Right, because we're going to do physiology and chemistry before, and we didn't do the Renaissance in the spring, so we're doing that at the very beginning because I feel like that hits her better at, she's 8th grade, but she's the 7th grade age. Right. And so, and so it's just, even though I've taught some of this before, I feel like how I taught it was so...
It's different because your children are very different.
They are, but it's also because I've digested the information, but now it's like I feel like I'm still relearning it, and I'm still relearning, and I haven't taught 5th.
I'm like my 4th time around on a lot of things, and I go, all right, well, there, I'll find more nuggets that make more sense.
Yeah.
The first 3 times. By the time you get to McRae, you'll be in great shape.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just trying to balance all those, and it's just and 8th grade does feel like it's just an enormous amount of information to learn.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
That's why, I loosely say, and in the 9th, if you have to. I think that if you can't get through it all, it's just so much. I was just, it's just a lot.
Yeah, it is. And so, I mean, and
there's, again, nothing that you can go, oh, I just won't do that.
There is actually, French Revolution is going to be 3 days, because I'm like, it just can't fit, and.
No, but I mean, there's not a lot of history pieces where you go, well, I'm just not going to cover that.
Oh, right, exactly.
You shorten things up for sure, and I have been very appreciative of some of those, like the French Revolution in 3 minutes videos on YouTube for myself.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I can remember this now. Then it's easier to go and dive into things.
Yep, definitely.
As part of my study. Definitely not the whole thing.
Yeah, so that's my main thing, is just trying to absorb the information so I can, I've done which blocks we're doing, but I'm not doing my weekly lessons or my daily lessons till I've read everything, and I've been kind of doing it one block at a time, which feels a little scary to not have it all, but at the same time, I know what I'm teaching when I'm doing, I feel like that's where I really messed up last year. And so I'm like, okay, read not all the information, but as much as I can.
Right, absolutely.
Because that's the problem is for every one of these blocks, I mean, even 5th grade, it's so much to consume.
It is a lot to consume. So, you for sure want to have that understanding for contents spot done before you do the detailed planning. But then when you are coming in the week before, 2 weeks before, try to stay ahead of it, that's when you're really making sure that you're dug into it, So for sure, if you had to learn all of the pieces before you started, it would be too hard. In September.
That's kind of where I feel. But I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get it all done. So how many months ahead can I get it done?
Right. And that's really what's good. And then make sure that you know when you're going to plan the next piece.
Yep.
You
That's what I'm.
You and your husband already talked about it. Hey, this weekend right here, I'm going to need that weekend because that's what I'm doing the rest of it.
Yeah, I built in some weeks of no school so that
Good.
either A, it's a catch-up week, or B, it's a planning week.
Good. Very good.
Yep. Yay.
I'm so much more confident than that mom 2 years ago that had left school and you didn't know what you were going to do.
Yeah. Oh, well, definitely. Well, I feel like it just it's that doing 2 years of it and not doing it how I wanted to, but also just gaining that experience.
You're refining.
It's just the coming in the middle. Coming in middle school, I think, is the tricky part. You know, I really see that if you started younger, it feels maybe easier as it gets older.
Maybe easy.
Not easier, but you already have the tools in your toolbox.
Right. I think it's that
to expand.
Simpler rather than easier. That makes
right.
sense. Like the process is simpler because you've been doing it. The content might not be easier, but the process is definitely simpler. Sure. I could totally see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I see even just approaching McCrae. It's like, oh, I'm just understanding it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And can I ask you a quick 5th grade question?
Yeah.
Or actually, no, because I asked it on the weekend, and actually, I just remembered you answered that. So never mind. I'm good.
No problem. I'm like trying to get used to see my table. People are like, where can we eat? I go, oh, let me move all my crap again. Because I'm trying to get ready for this weekend.
Yes.
I'm going to breathe out really heavy after Saturday.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
I'll probably sleep all day Sunday. No, just kidding.
I would.
Right. Yeah, we have people in town. That's not happening. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you good?
I'm good.
Anybody else want to have questions about this next space?
I just have another question about the planner.
Yes.
It says, so when you do your daily plans, are you planning those all ahead of time? Or are you, like you said, like 2 weeks before you're doing into your daily plan?
I try to get a really good batch of my dailies done. I like to have through December, but I try to keep it loose enough so that it's like that I'm coming back through the Sunday before and making things more concrete, if that makes sense, because maybe we didn't get to these songs last week in our music lesson, so they have to go in this week. Or maybe, we're moving some things around. I was thinking about last year, we missed a whole week. So rather than rewrite the whole thing, I just whited out the dates and changed them around. But I definitely have enough to get me to get us really going. And I know what I'm expecting of them for. So let me back up. For Soraya in 1st grade, all planned. All the dailies done through December at least. And main lesson paintings done, or at least I know where I did one before that I can pull a copy out. That kind of all done. Samuel, he's in 6th grade. I will have his dailies done, at least 3 months, just because I want to make sure I don't want to get behind. And then my job is when I'm at 6 weeks out to sit down and do the next batch, so that yes, I know where we've been. I can adjust what I've already written a little bit if I need to, and then I can plan the next 6 weeks. Just of the dailies, though, everything else is planned. The weeks are, the weekly portions are planned. All my notes are there. I've got notes in other places as needed. Then it's just me writing the dailies in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it, like I said, it changes as they get older. And Eleanor's dailies in high school looked way different because, in fact, I didn't even use the daily pages in high school for her. Because we stuck with the weekly stuff, because it was more like a topic for the week, and this is what we're working on for the whole week. And I wanted to, so I would, on the weekly pages, I would write down everything that, in fact, where's last year's planner? Hold on. I would write down everything I wanted to get through for the week with her, and it would be, that's what I went off of. So it's like the whole week. So I put, so this one is like turn in finished paper, get it all printed out. So this was like the week of January, the week of, actually, you know what? That's not right. Somehow I wrote that as dailies. That's not what I was looking for. Hold on, I'll find it. Here we go. All right, Marcus Aurelius. In ancient history for October, we did like week 1. The topic was Marcus Aurelius. I wanted her to do painting and a paper. And I had the Marcus Aurelius book that she was reading. So she was reading, he wrote this book that she was, because of where she was like wanting to study politics, it lit her up and she carried it around. And it's not very long. It might only be like 100 pages. But it's like a lot of poetry, and he was this great leader and tactical management. It was good. So these were all that, I didn't go to dailies from these because this was what I needed for her. And her content was way different. My approach to her was way different. So where we were doing, like the next week after that, we were working on going back through some ancient history, and we talked, but I also had her go back through and rewatch Engineering an Empire. And her words were, I think I told you the first time that this was really boring. You're so one-dimensional. You're going to watch it anyway. Here, I'll sit down and watch it with you. I'll get some knitting done. But, I wanted her to, and I made her write summaries about each of them. So I knew that she wasn't falling asleep while she was watching them. So I've got like the ideas for her paintings even on here. And I just did not break them down into dailies as much. She was pretty much a self-starter when it came to music. I didn't have to worry about her music because my thing has always been, as long as you're, practicing one new song a month and you're getting really good at it, then that's all I want to hear on the piano. And we were doing math together, so that was already laid out and I didn't need to write it down. And because she preferred, now all kids aren't going to prefer this, but she really preferred to know her topic for the week, so we would talk about it on Monday, and then through the week I would give her the more information, and then I would say on Monday too, by the end of the week I want a painting on, and I'm going to expect a written piece on, and I let her start typing everything in high school.
Yeah, and so you weren't giving her any art lessons. She was like doing her own.
Listen, this kid, no.
I saw.
No.
Yeah.
And there was a shift because I've been going through all through the art pieces for the summer camp, and so I sort of had a lot of her art laid out, and I can see where her shift went to more of from it being external, where she was drawing and doing well, like in some of her like she had a bug up her butt to study the states. And so she did like the state flower for everything. So you can see where it went from being like this external thing to all of a sudden becoming this internal thing for her. It's almost like you can see it in her art, where it took a hold of her, and you knew that was something that was really important to her after that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's not that way for every child.
No. But I guess I have like a book on like Waldorf art and like how to give it to the older grades, and I'm like, oh my God, do I have one more thing I have to do?
And I think I said this in the summer camp. It's going to be really interesting this year with Samuel because he is colorblind. So I've been, like helping him with colors all this time. But 6th grade, they do a lot of black and white and shadow. So that's going to be interesting because sometimes he doesn't see the shadow. So I would say you take them as far as you feel really comfortable, and then if you can outsource. I think what will tend to happen if we're not careful is we get to that place where they've gone ahead of us, and then we stop. And unless they're self-starters and they're wanting to keep going, like Harry loved manga, and so he would do all of his stuff in that style, and he kept going on with that. Jacob, he did art fine when we were doing the lower grades, but he did not really want to move forward. And so his lessons were very was very matter of fact and but that was sort of where he was. So I think that if you can outsource some pieces or find somebody, maybe you and Anna Catherine can get together. She's an artist. She can come and teach you for the upper grades. Do you have any thoughts about that, Anna Catherine, as
Yeah, well, because I was thinking about Brierley is a self-starter,
Mhm.
and I give her less direction.
Mhm.
Whereas Locke is actually very creative, but he needs a place to start. And what I found is that I had a really hard time, like on Pinterest or anywhere, finding art for, say, American history.
Yeah.
But I did actually. I mean, I found some, and so like when we studied the Capitol and or talked about the 3 branches of government, I did like just a loose black and white sketch in pencil of the 3 buildings
Mhm.
and really simplified it. And then I gave him that and let him take it from there.
Mhm.
Or like there was a painting of Benjamin Franklin and I forget the other people in the picture. And I gave it to him and I said, and we just talked about picking out the main lines to draw and taking your time. And, those things, like that drawing took him 2 weeks. And that was, so maybe for that whole block, and we did American history over 8 weeks, maybe he had 6 art pieces, but he worked really hard on those.
Right.
And
quality over quantity, I definitely think is what we're looking at.
And so for him, I felt like those were really amazing pieces. And kind of what I noticed is he really pushes himself,
Mm-hmm.
even if the final product isn't the most amazing thing. Versus Brierley, she's actually, I feel like she could give me more. And she doesn't. And with 7th grade, I let that go. And in 8th grade,
Right.
I'm like, this year I think actually you're going to have to work on that a little more. And things like, I just like Locke really has fun with titles. And so I'll just say, create your title however you want. I just need to read it and it needs to be evenly spaced. Mm-hmm. And so, he'll create them out of machines or something that he thought was something we studied, something about Benjamin Franklin, things that tie in. And so I'm not necessarily creating all the art. For him, I will if he needs it. And in the sciences, like when we did physics, I just tried to have one that's a freeform drawing and one that's a laboratory drawing. And some I just let them pick.
Right. For sure.
And I feel like that's what, once I started, I started off middle school too many drawings, too specific, whereas they want to have a voice. And so even if they want to have a voice, they may say, can you help me? And so then, and some of it's just handing them a picture, printing out a color copy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Does that help, Lisa? That's totally what we do.
Yeah, just be relaxed. Yeah.
I think that.
Yeah, like I don't.
Well, I was going to say, especially because we've been focusing on this, like 2 drawings a week, like all this time, and then all of a sudden we get here, and then we're letting them have, like, especially at home, much more individuality. I mean, still often in a Waldorf school, you walk in and there's like 6 portraits of the exact same thing for the middle school and the high school, so they're doing the same things. But at home, I like to let them have some control over that, because the idea is that you've given them these lessons, they have some skills. Let's take that and hopefully grow with it. And 2, YouTube is a great place for some like art lessons and stuff. If you need some extra.
Yeah, I was gonna say, actually, like I did a Abraham Lincoln chalk drawing for our blog, and it was a YouTube video that I used to just help figure out how to put it on the board. And
it's really good to hear, because you're an artist.
Yeah, well, I like to go find, like, if whatever I'm doing on the chalkboard, I go find an example and then I'll make it my own, but it doesn't just come in my head.
Right.
I need, and I don't have time. Like, if I had all the time in the world, but if I can go and find something that says, okay, start with these lines. And I did that with that chalk drawing. I mean, maybe it was a pastel drawing or a charcoal drawing, the YouTube video, and then I just translated it to chalk.
Nice. Very good. No,
Yeah.
very good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Are you good, Lisa? Feeling good?
Yeah.
All right, very good. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions or want to share? Nobody? Okay, I guess we'll wrap up then. Does everybody do you guys feel like you got everything answered? Do you feel like you're in a good place? Yeah? Okay. And we are going in depth at the summer camp this weekend. So for all the grades. Really excited.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. We're going up to camp this weekend, so I'm hoping we get service up there. But
well, there will be the replay for sure. And Eric is actually funny story. He's been trying to, like, he thought he'd have the replay done by now, but the second day is like 8 hours and it's taking forever to render, and so it'll be done. So we'll have it for everybody eventually. So hopefully he'll have some time to work on it tomorrow. But it'll all be together. Well, it'll be nice because we're going to break it out by grade, and then if you just want 8th grade, you can just go to the 8th grade video. So that way you don't have to watch it all.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I figured everybody would. I would appreciate it. So I think it'll be easier that way. All right, very good. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week and a good weekend. And if you need anything, you know where to find me.
Thank you.
Later. Bye, guys.